Welcome to another edition of Walnut Grove Cultural Conversations, where Stephen and I sit down and take a chat and take a look at some things that are going on in our world and try to figure out, hey, how should we as Christians, we as local pastors think about these things, and what are some things we can take away from certain situations or issues or just topics. And the topic today is one that is very powerful and very is meaningful to each of us, kind of a hero in the faith, I think, for us. Martin Luther King Jr. We celebrated on the 15th, the Martin Luther King Day, but another maybe lesser known day is the 30th of January, yeah, which is the bombing of his house. Was that the year prior, or do we know?
That was in, I think, 1956.
Okay, so...
Yeah. Quite a few years before, yeah. But it was this moment where, right, in Montgomery, someone bombs his house, a white supremacist tries to kill him and his family, and this huge crowd from the community gathers outside of his house. You can kind of imagine it like this impromptu church service, right, of anger, of frustration bubbling over. And Martin Luther King Jr. famously told the crowd, "I want you to love our enemies. I want them to know you love them." And it was this total reversal, right? If moment in his ministry and his work ever pushed him to the point of going against his nonviolence philosophy, I would imagine someone bombing your house would be that moment.
Yes.
And instead he comes back to the power of agape love. And what I run into, and tell me if this is you, is sometimes love, like love your neighbor as yourself, it kind of becomes cliche.
Yes. It
sounds like a get out of jail free card. Oh, what are we supposed to do? Just love. Mm-hmm. And it seems cheap.
Yeah.
But what I go back to is that agape love, this self-sacrificing, surrendered love, is far from cheap. In fact, it always costs something.
Yeah, I think true love, in the sense that we're talking about, is outside of a comfort zone. Is outside of your wheelhouse, as it were, right?
Yeah.
Where it is causing you to do something that says, I am not as important as this situation, or I'm not as important as the other person. And I think that that's one of the things. Like, a lot of times, the love that the world sells,
right,
is cheap love, yeah, is love that fulfills me. But the love that we see Martin Luther King talking about and the Bible talking about is a love that is an action word that is trying to seek the fulfillment and the help and the flourishing of other people.
Yeah. It really goes back to the Missio Dei, right? The mission of God that asks the question, what would it look like for God to reign here? Mm-hmm. And that Missio Dei is so important. And I want to just read an excerpt of one of Martin Luther King Jr.'s speeches that he gave, one called An Experiment in Love. And he wrote about this agape love. He said, agape is disinterested love. It's a love in which the individual seeks not his own good, but the good of his neighbor. Agape does not begin by discriminating between worthy and unworthy people, or any qualities people possess. It begins by loving others for their sakes. It's an entirely neighbor-regarding concern for others, which discovers the neighbor in every man it meets. Therefore, agape makes no distinction between friends and enemy. It's directed towards both. It springs from the need of the other person. He goes on to say, agape is not weak, passive love. It's love in action. Agape is love seeking to preserve and create community. It's insistence on community even when one seeks to break it. Agape is a willingness to go to any length to restore community. It doesn't stop at the first mile, but it goes the second to restore community. It's a willingness to forgive, not 7 times, but 70 times 7 to restore community. And as I think the first thing we got to make clear is this isn't just Martin Luther King Jr. Day. This is Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.
Yes, I think that gets lost in the in the milieu and the messaging of the day. Is this his messages and his heart came from the church. It came from a Christian movement. It came from the Christian movement of love.
Those are Jesus' words that he's talking about there, and it's powerful because agape love seems weak. It seems cliche, but when we understand that Jesus Christ defeats death with agape love, that Jesus Christ restores humanity by agape love, when it's the weapon that he chooses, right? Jesus has the power to do anything he wants, to use any weapon at his disposal, to call down legions of angels if he so desires. Mm-hmm. And he chooses agape love. He chooses the cross. Mm-hmm. And as I think about applying this, right, not just like celebrating a day or being off work, mm-hmm. or your kids being home terrorizing your house, is there's an application here of we are called to that same level of community building with the agape love, with that weapon of real war. Mm-hmm. Not against flesh and blood, but against something far more insidious. Yeah. And we live in this world right now that's so divided. And as Christian believers, how do we respond? With agape love that insists on community even when someone wants to break it.
I thought it was interesting, that speech, the excerpt you read. Yeah. It started out with this idea that agape love is disinterested. Yeah. And I think that that's one of the things. A lot of times you'll see love with a caveat, love with a tie on, right? Where we're saying, we'll love if.
It's love with an if.
Yes.
Right? I'll love you if you meet my needs. Mm-hmm.
If you're like this, if you're in this group, if you're not in that group.
Right.
But instead, it's saying, what he is saying in there is, it's disinterested. It does not care.
I love you regardless.
Right? Paul says there is neither Greek nor Jew, Scythian nor, I can't remember the other.
Slave nor free.
Slave nor free. It doesn't matter. He's saying it's all the same under the banner of Christ. And it does not matter. And so that is the role that we have, right? You said Missio Dei, the mission of God earlier. And I think that is something that we need to latch on to today, that we need to latch on to going forward, right? That love doesn't end at the cross, and love doesn't end at
those from things. The cross. That's the beauty, yeah.
And it's always out into differentness, not towards sameness. Right. Right? It's always towards something that's different. All the way back to the book of Deuteronomy, which is the 5th book in the Bible, all the way back to there, even earlier than that. It's always to a people, to a person that is not like us, that seemingly doesn't deserve it.
Right, leave the edge of your field unharvested. Why? Because someone who's unlike you, who's not in the same fiscal position, needs help.
Yeah, and I think that edging that into our lives and making it a part of our identity of who we are, and not just making it lip service, not just making it, not just making it a platitude so that our neighbor returns the spade that they borrowed earlier this year, but instead a sacrificial, a giving of self, right, so that someone may flourish. And I'm reminded of the C.S. Lewis quote to end, where he talks about, to love at all is to be vulnerable. Yeah. If you love at all, you will more than likely be hurt. But the temptation is to lock it up in a casket and to guard it, and then you will not be hurt, but you will also not love. Right. And I think that's one of the... It perishes, and it withers away and dies. And I think that that sentiment from C.S. Lewis, yes, it's hard. And if the type of love that you're showcasing isn't hard, then it's probably not Jesus Christ love. It's not agape love.
I mean, let's go back to the life of Martin Luther King Jr. for a second. Nothing about what he did to bring true civil rights, dignity for all men and women, regardless of their skin color, was easy. I mean, the end of his story is assassination. Like his earthly story, right? Is assassination. But the end of Jesus' story seemingly is the cross. And yet, the beauty of the Christian message is it doesn't end there. Right? We're still celebrating this today. We're still joining together in communities of Christ's name, celebrating that we have a resurrected Savior, that we still have a source of agape love. Because I don't know about you, if I'm called to produce sacrificial love just on who I am, everyone's in trouble. Yeah. Like with coffee, without coffee, we're still in trouble. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I think we have to come back and realize that this is the only answer that's going to work. Yeah. It's not going to be political power. It's not going to be a political movement. It's not going to be anything else other than moving beyond lip service
Mm-hmm.
and getting into life service.
Yes. And I think that that's how we should end today, is a sending out of, go and do life service of others and love of others. That's what we need to be doing. And so, if you've liked this or if you have any thoughts on this, go ahead and click like, comment down below. We want to have a conversation about this. What are some things that this talk has encouraged you? What are some things that Martin Luther King has taught you, has challenged you? And what are some things that that maybe we need to grow in more? And so comment those things down below. Hit like, share it out with your friends, because I think this is an important topic for today. A day of division and a day of hatred that has really poisoned the watering holes and has kind of not allowed love in through, but I believe that it can break down those barriers.
Yeah, real quick. We live in this time where we're all choosing who to love, and if you're a Christian, you don't get to choose who to love. You have to love who Christ loves.
And He loves everyone.
And He loves everyone.
So go and love everyone. We'll see you guys next week.
Cheers.
Cheers.